Hello everyone, Gary here from RC Street Wars and Exotek Racing, and today we're going to start a build overview on your Exotek Vader car. The very first step in the build is to build your differential. Now, I like to take all my parts out of the bag, I lay them out and make sure I have everything there that I need to start. A perfect example was as I was opening the bag, I laid all the parts. It looked like I was missing one of these pins. It just so happened it was stuck in the very corner edge of the bag, and I found it. But point being, I noticed it was missing, and I went looking for it. So it's a good habit. Now let's get into the differential. The first things I'm going to do is get my trusty blue O-ring grease, and I will always coat the O-rings that go on the output shafts with a little bit of grease before I insert them into their respective housings. I also will take a light smear of grease and grease the gasket to help keep the gasket in good shape through its use of life. So let's get started. Okay, now that I have put grease on the O-rings, inserted them onto the output shaft and pushed the output shaft through each one of these housings, there is a large washer shim that will go on next on both. Then those two small pins will push through a hole in the output shaft. The way you do this is there's a notch on the side cover, and you line the pin up with the notch on the side cover and slide it through. And then on the differential itself, you'll see that there is 4 slots that are the crosses for the spider gears. You line the pin up with one of these slots, and I use some long reach needle nose pliers, and I also have some tweezers that make this easy. But once I do that, I line it up and I push that pin through. You're ready to put the side gears on, and the side gears will sit on top of these, and you line them up. Sometimes you can just twist them and they'll fall onto the pins. After that, what you see, I've already assembled my spider gears onto the cross shafts, and you'll see that there is these 4 shim washers, one on each one. They were part of the ones I had laid out. They go behind each one of these spider gears. What I personally like to do is put the spider gears on the shaft, take the shafts and line them up so that the 2 flats are interlocking. At this point, I'm ready to start putting oil in the differential. Now, I did this a little bit differently. I actually will fill this up 3/4 of the way with oil first, and I'll let the oil just settle and sit while this is just settling. I'll move on to other steps. But once that the oil is settled, I will pick this up like this and line it up in the grooves and start pushing it down, spreading the gears out and forcing it down. I'll then start wiggling the gear to get this to line up, but I find that it fills the differential up much nicer, and at that point I'm going to let it sit a little bit longer until the oil has smoothed out, and then I'll assemble it. Now that I have the side gears in place, I will start to fill the differential with oil, let it settle. Here's a quick little tip. You can take one of your old paint cans and use your body reamer and ream out a hole on the top that you can set your differential on. It's a nice sturdy place to support the diff while you're filling it and while you're putting your side gears on. Now that the differential is settling, I'm going to start getting the transmission ready for assembly. The first thing I do is I lay my bearings out, and this is the only oil that I use. The bearings should be pre-oiled, but I think it's just a good habit. Make sure that you oil them. So I use this Avid Slip, S-L-I-P bearing oil. This is the absolute best bearing oil I've ever used. I've tried so many of them, and this is the one that just produces the best results. So I really like it, but I'm going to apply oil to the bearings And then you're going to take your two 10 millimeter bearings, and you're going to press them into your idler gear. And then this is the idler gear shaft that will go through there. And then the rest of the bearings support the top shaft. So let me get started. I've had my bearings all oiled up. What I do is I use the top shaft to put these bearings into place. So I'll literally just put it on the top shaft, press into place, and I'll put the other one on the shaft this side, press it through, and then you'll insert your top shaft like so, and your idler gear like so. When you finish the differential will go here, and we'll assemble it all together. Now that I've inserted the top shaft, I'm going to put the motor plate on using the 3 flathead screws that will go here. Listen, this is something that I am going to hammer home. Go out and get yourself some of this Loctite thread locker stick. This is very easy to use. It doesn't run and get all over the place. I put the screw on the end of my tool, and I just turn it into the paste, and I will put the screws in. Anytime, and I repeat, anytime you are screwing anything together that's going into metal threads, whether that be steel or aluminum, you must use Loctite. Only screwing into plastic, you will not use Loctite, but anything, anytime you are screwing any thread into anything that's aluminum, you must use Loctite. And that's going to mean the screws that go into the transmission, the screws that hold the control arms onto the pillow balls. Anytime you're putting a screw into threads that are aluminum, use Loctite, okay? And like I said, go out, get the stick Loctite. You can get it on Amazon, parts store, you can find it anywhere. I find it significantly easier to use than liquid Loctite. Like I said, just put your screw on the end of your tool, turn it in the Loctite, and screw it in. Now that you have your motor plate on and Loctite on the screws, tighten down, you can put on your slipper eliminator drive. So this is going to be the drive for your spur gear. It's going to install with, there's a long post side. It's going to go towards the transmission, and the side that has this machined edge is going to go face outward, and the nut will tighten down. There are 3 screws that are going to affix your spur gear to this adapter. I just put them in here for now so I don't lose them. And as soon as my differential's done over there, I'll put it in the transmission and use the 3 screws and seal it all up. Okay, everyone. Well, my differential is all put together. And I'm ready to put it in the transmission housing. A couple things. When you are doing the final assembly on your differential, again, I use some of that blue grease to hold the side gear on that's underneath this cover. So when I turn it over, it just doesn't fall. I like it to be held in place so it stays on the pin. The other thing that you need to be very careful of is to line up the gaskets so that the 4 holes are lined up. I just use one of these little needle applicators to move it around to make sure it's in place. And then the last thing I want to say is very carefully line up the cover with the 4 holes and start your screws, okay, in a crisscross pattern, but don't run them down all the way. Just do a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Get it really close and turn both shafts, or actually just turn one. The other one should turn and everything should feel nice and smooth. If you can turn it and it feels nice and smooth, then you can start to run these down in a crisscross pattern, and you can be sure that everything has seated well. The next thing I'm going to tell you is you're probably going to get some oil oozing out. you're going to want to clean that oil. It is very sticky and very tacky. So I just use some brake clean and a good rag, and I clean it off, and I make sure that there's no oil on the gears. Now, when you go to install it in the transmission, here is a tip. If you were to, because this differential is symmetrical, which is a great idea and a great design, I install it, which means we can install it either direction. I will install it with the screws facing me, and these will be facing the left side of the car. There is a reason for this. Some people have had differential screws work their way out. The reason the differential screws work their way out for some people is because they install it this way. When they install it this way, and this is not on this car, just in the past, so I want to make that clear. When they install it this way, especially with an aluminum case differential, the screws are on the right-hand side, and the rotation has a tendency to want to work the screws out. If you put the screws this way, facing the left-hand side of the car, the rotating force, because remember, this is rotating, even though we have an idler gear here, this is rotating in the direction that moves the car forward, is going to want to keep the screws tight. So when you install it with the screws facing you like this, and it will be the left-hand side of the car, and it should stay tight. Now, the last thing I want to tell you is, I know the manual calls for some grease, and you should have some kind of lubricant on these gears, but me personally, if you can see, I got this funny, really thin yellow oil, and I put it in this needle application bottle. What this is, and I'm going to tell you, you can get it yourself, it's racing gearbox oil. It's made by the Redline Synthetic Oil Company, and it is the full synthetic, super light, shockproof oil. This is generally for like racing motorcycles and things like that, but this oil is designed for gears. It is very thin, but when it gets warm, it will actually attach and make a film on the gears. So all I do is I apply it, and I rotate and apply, rotate until I get a nice film across all of this, and then I'll assemble the gearbox together. So again, this is my tip. I use the Redline super light shockproof oil. I get one these little needle application, but you can see how thin this is. It doesn't reduce any drag. It does not contribute to any drag in the gearbox, and it will not be dragging you down. I think the grease will be contributing to drag where this will not. So now that we have our transmission assembled and we've checked and it's spinning freely, we're going to put it off to the side, and we're going to start opening up some more bags and carbon bits. So now we're going to be working on the rear shock tower and some components towards the rear of the transmission and the arms. Now, I am going to tell you, pay attention when you are building anything in any kit, including this one, to the orientation of such parts. You'll see here, there is our rear shock tower, and here's the counter bore for these screws. So I always like to hold the parts in the same orientation as the picture. That way I assemble it correctly, because you'll notice there are certain ball ends that are facing one way, and then other ones that are facing in a different direction. So good practice, just hold it in the same orientation and pay attention to little details like where the counter bores are and things like that, and it'll save you some trouble. All right, let me jump on. One thing to note is that a lot of the ball ends on this kit are going to use a 5.5 millimeter hex. So you can use your trusty 5.5 millimeter nut driver to help tighten it. Or Exotek actually does sell these really nice wrench kits, and they work on this kit amazing. But there's a 5.5 and a 7.0, which is going to come in handy for the kit, because you can use the 5.5 wrench on here and the 7 millimeter wrench on those. And then this is for the ball cups and your turnbuckles. So I actually have a couple sets of these. I keep them in the trailer. I keep them all over the place because they're super handy for more than just this kit. But pay attention that to properly secure these, you will need to use a 5.5 millimeter. Okay, the rear shock tower is assembled. Two things to note here. These ball ends are aluminum, so these screws did get Loctite. There is Loctite on all of these screws. Also, the lower ones that go here, they go in the lower hole. There is two holes that they can go in. It goes in the lower hole. So this is the correct orientation. These counter bores will face the front of the car once it's installed. This is for the top shock mount. This is for the shock mount on the other side. And then these are for the camber links. So this is the correct way. Again, Loctite on all of these, because remember, like I said, these are aluminum. So we're going to use Loctite anytime we're threading into aluminum. And this one here goes in the lower hole. When you do it right, you can just see the top of the hole exposed at the top of the screw. All right, the next step is we're going to take our rear shock tower that we just put the ball studs on. We're going to mount it onto this rear support bracket, and it will mount on the transmission. So you're going to use two 3x8 flathead screws to mount this to the bracket, and then two 3x12 button head screws. They're going to go through the ears on the transmission housing, through the shock tower, and into this rear support bracket. Okay, next, you're going to be assembling the control arms. Now, the beauty of this car is everything is symmetrical, and it's the same parts in the front as it is in the rear, which saves you a lot of time and a lot of spare parts in your toolbox. So what I like to do is save time, and I build actually all my arms at the same time. I will build two on one side, two on the other side. So what you can do is take the arms and put two one orientation and the other two the other orientation. You just flip them upside down from each other, and that's how you get them. So you can build all four at the same time. Now, each arm is going to get two of the balls with the big bases at the inside, and one of these pillow balls are going to go outside. So this is the inside into the chassis. This is outside towards the hub spindle. Now, you're going to press these inserts onto the balls. The way you do it is the lip that's here faces down. Okay, I get myself a nice hard surface, and I will place this on top, and it does take a little bit of force, so I can't really do this with one hand, but you will press them in, and then they will slide in to the arm from the bottom, and then they will get locked in place with these E-clips. So they'll press in through the bottom, and then this E-clip will catch the very top of this and lock it into place, and it'll look just like that. But like I said, you can save yourself some time by building all four of these at the same time, because they are identical, just two are opposite the others. So press all your pillow balls into the cups, grab your arms, push them in from the bottom, and these you can do, takes a little bit of effort, but you can usually do it with the tip of your finger or a small flat blade screwdriver. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you a really good free one here. Here is probably the best tip I'm going to give you of this video. If by some chance you have an old Team Associated plastic differential gear housing, it just so happens that this thing is a perfect fit to fit into the thin end of these cups, and with the lip facing down, you can put it on top of the ball stud and snap it into place. These things do take a good amount of force. They fit pretty tight. So for me, this is my little trick to doing it with the least amount of pain on the tips of my fingers. So if you have one of these laying around, it's really useful. I'll be honest with you. So you can do it with your fingers. It does take a little bit of force, but if you do have one of these, this is well worth it, I promise you. And there you have it. The first one is done. Again, like I said, they'll press in from the bottom. You are going to use this E-clip and it'll go through the groove. So I'm going to make the other 3 and I'll be right back. Okay, now that I have all 4 arms finished and the pillow balls are installed, I like to lay them out exactly how they're going to go on the car. And the way they're going to go on the car is front left, front right, rear left, rear right. And the way you know this is this long slot faces the rear of the car, so towards the back of the car. So you will have one front right with the slot towards the back, one rear right with the slot towards the back, one rear left with the slot towards the back, and one front left with the slot towards the back. Why I do this is because now it's really easy to install your lower shock mount. So everything on this car works with these pillow balls. So on the front, you'll see that there's 3 holes. The front mounts will be the outermost holes, so towards the outside. This is the outside. This is where the wheel is. This is the inside towards the chassis. The front will get these towards the outside holes. Okay, you can just go ahead and do this now. The rear, on the other hand, will have them all the way to the inside. So this is the outside where the tire is. 1, 2, 3, the innermost set. So both rears will get it on the innermost set. Both fronts will get it on the outermost set. Like I said, if you lay this out like this, now's a good time to do it. Make sure you put your thread locker on your screws. And your arms are all done front and rear. All right, everyone, we're back. So all your arms are now finished. One thing to note is the front arms will get this lower shock mount on the top of the arms. This is the top, okay? The top of the arm all the way in the outermost hole towards the tire. The rear, on the other hand, have it all the way inside, but on the bottom. So the side where the pedestals are is where the lower shock mount. So remember, this piece right here is for the ball cup on the shock. It's just the same piece. It's symmetrical. So it's on both sides. I wouldn't worry about it. Only one side gets used. But just remember, on the rear, they go on the bottom. On the front, they go on the top. So after you have built all 4 of your arms, the next step is to do the up travel limiters. Now, the way this works is there's a 3x20 flathead screw that's going to go through the 4 spots on the chassis, and then you're going to use a M3 lock nut and make it tight, which is going to jam up this screw. And this is the travel stop limiter, and the base setting is for 12 mil for the bottom of this nut to be 12 millimeters off the chassis. What I do is I get my calipers and I set it to 12 millimeters exactly, and I lock it, and then I will place it on the chassis underneath the nut, and I'll use my nut driver until I just lightly contact the caliper, and then I do this all 4 corners, and I know I have that set. I will tell you the kit comes with down travel limiters for the arms that screw through the carbon. Right now, I am not using them. I am actually a really big fan of the limiters in both directions, but I am finding that these just do not stay as well as I would personally like them. So my recommendation to anyone for right now is to not use the ones that thread through the arms, but use and set these, and let's see what we can do about making this a little bit more robust. I just my initial feeling from the first kit that I built was I didn't feel that this would stay secure enough in the exact place I set it to repeatedly, pass after pass. But it's a great idea. I think maybe we just need like a locking positive insert here, and this will be amazing. But both of these ideas are amazing ideas, and we really should be taking advantage of it. So I'll get on with the build. Here I have the first two done, and I'm going to let you guys cheat a little bit if you do not have a good pair of calipers. But I am going to tell you, if you do not, this is a absolute must. It is critical. You're really going to need calipers to do your turnbuckles. I know this could be a little bit more of an investment for tools for some people, but good quality tools like these MIP tools I use and a good quality caliper is an absolute must, especially because we're investing so much energy and time and money into this hobby. So to not have a set of calipers, you're really hurting yourself. But if you need to cheat, I can tell you, if the screw is flush with the top of the nut, you're going to be really close. After doing this one, I noticed that it was pretty much flush. I set this one just by eye at first, flush, and it was pretty much dead on. So if you just set it flush, you're going to be really close. All right, well, at this point, the car is going to go together very quickly. The arms, you'll notice, are just amazing. They move so smooth. There is very little to almost no play at all, front to back. Here's where your 7mm comes in handy, because you will use it on the base to hold it, while you use your 2mm to tighten the flathead screw from the bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're gonna go from there. At the same time, you're gonna build the front shock tower and the front shock tower support. So same thing, just pay attention to the manual where everything goes on the front shock tower. I am going to give you a tip, and that there is 4 screws here and 4 screws here. I will put the shock tower on the mounts snug, and then I will put these in snug, and then I will very evenly tighten them in a crisscross pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Once I get these nice and tight, I will then go ahead and these 4 right here, finish tightening them down. I like to do this with just about everything I do on any car, because it ensures that this is going to go on straight and it is uniformly tight. So now, if you look, this car goes together very quickly. We are really moving on this thing. All right, next up are some turnbuckles. Hello everyone, now it's time to assemble the front turnbuckles. So you're going to notice that I have already laid them out in the orientation that they go on the car. I'll get to this in a second. There is a supplemental paperwork that comes with your Exotek Vader kit. I suggest paying attention to it and becoming familiar with it, but I'm going to give you my method, which I find to be a fairly foolproof method for assembling the turnbuckles and getting them right the first time. So again, you'll see here I have them all laid out, and they're laid out exactly how they go on the car. You're going to notice that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with green paint on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 still black. The reason I do this is I will paint the turnbuckles the ends that have the right hand thread. I will also pre-thread them using a screw that I dip in black grease, and I'll also put a little grease using a pick or some other small tool, and I'll just do a light coat in there. But I'll use my driver or regular driver wrench, and I'll pre-thread it all the way, and I may run it 1 or 2 times all the way in, all the way out. But I'm going to do the same with the left-hand thread. But for the left-hand thread, you're going to need to go out and get, at least if you want to do it my way, a M3 left-hand thread screw. Now, I'll tell you, these are fairly easy to find. They're not really that difficult. You should be able to find it on Amazon. But if you shop online, a company like A-Main, if you just do M3 left-hand thread or M3 left-hand thread screws, or just even left-hand thread screws, you'll find, I mean, it's very popular for the 8-scale off-road guys to use left-hand thread screws on 2 opposite corners of the buggy to keep the screws from backing out. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'll pre-thread all of my rod ends. I'm going to lube them up. This is going to make the assembly significantly easier, because now what I like to use is my shock pliers. I'll grab the turnbuckle and I will thread the ends on, and I just try to get it close and even on both sides. And then once I actually have it on the car, I'm going to use the dimensions that are provided in the manual. But I just like to get it close, and I like to get it even, and then I'll adjust it on the car. But if you lay them out in the exact order that they go on the car, it's going to make assembling them much easier. It's going to help you realize how they lay out on the car, and you can clock them, and it tells you how to clock them in here, and you can look at the manual. Just some things to pay attention to. It will show you to put in the screw. The screw does go in from the bottom, so the purposes of the manual, the turnbuckle orientation is upside down from how it goes on the car. You see this screw here. It is actually on the bottom, but for the purpose of the manual, to show you the screw that screws these two together, it's on the bottom. But this is the way it lays out on the car. So you can see that's the correct orientation. And it does, that's why it tells you that this is the right front, this is the left front. Obviously, they're opposite each other. But just to clear that up, you need to pay attention carefully to the manual, and I will provide a snapshot of this for your reference. But if you pre-thread them, mark your rights, leave the lefts. This is just how I do it. I always mark the right, and then the left I don't paint, so I just know that that's the left-hand thread. It makes it a lot easier. It also makes it easier when you're adjusting it, because you already know which is the right hand side. So when you're using your wrench to adjust it, you already know, are you going in or are you going out? Are you making it longer or shorter? Because you clearly can tell which is the right hand side. Again, they do have a hash mark on them. You can see the hash mark there. The hash mark on the turnbuckle will indicate the right hand thread side. Okay, it indicates the right hand thread side. So there you go. Let's get building. Hey guys, quick pro tip here. If you take your 1.5 millimeter driver and you put the rod ends on the driver and you pinch it tight with your fingers, you can actually hold it in place nice and steady while you run the screw in. So for me, this is the method I use, just to hold it tight and in place, and it just takes the pressure off your hands, and you can do it very quickly this way, running your screws in. So this is a little pro tip, but the 1.5 millimeter driver fits perfectly straight through the hole in the rod. Okay, everyone, now that we have assembled our front turnbuckles, we will install them onto the chassis. One of the things you're going to notice about this car is everything is incredibly smooth. I really have to say, what an amazing job these guys did on this car, because there is no play on this car and everything yet still moves incredibly smooth. So your next step is to build your front spindles, and you need to push the bearings into the spindles, put the front axles on, and tighten the screw. Now I'm going to give you a quick pro tip. Take an old wheel, plop this in to the old wheel. It'll hold the hex in place, and use your driver and tighten up the screw. It'll allow you to get the hex as tight as possible, and you can do it without damaging it. So, okay, now we are assembling the front spindles. We have the axles on. You're going to notice that the spindle has a long post and a short post. And you're also going to notice that it has this boss here. For the front, the spindle is installed with the long post facing up in the front. So this will be the left, and this will be the right. So what you're going to do is you're going to put the ball stud on the tall post side, and this is the right, and this is the left. It's the exact same spindle. You're just going to orient it this way. So remember, for the front, the spindle has the long post facing up, and the ball stud is also on the same side as the long post. So again, this is the left, and this one is the right. Now that we have installed our spindles and all our turnbuckles are in place, this is the perfect time to set the lengths, okay? Again, Exotek makes this beautiful tool. They make two of them. One side is for the ball cups to pop them off, and the other side is the 4mm wrench that fits the hex on the turnbuckle. So take a minute now, and now is when you can set it. What I like to do is put the toe links on, even though you don't have your servo on yet, because you can still hold one end with one hand and make some adjustments, and you can get this length a little bit closer. Ultimately, I like to set this perfectly when I have it on the servo, but with at least one end being held, you can put a wrench on one hand and hold it. Another tip that you can use is you can put your driver through with one hand, and the other hand use the wrench to get this closer. So now's the perfect time to do this. I would get these two exactly where they need to be, get this one really close, and then you can fine tune it when you have it on your servo. Okay, everybody, like I said, from this point on, the car build goes really quick. So we're going to take the transmission with rear shock tower that we assembled earlier, and it's going to go on the chassis plate. If you guys remember from earlier, I told you I just built all my turnbuckles at the same time, so now they're ready to go. This is the rear body mount. There is going to be ball studs that go on here. This is for the wheelie bar. These are for the camber links. They're going to go, this will mount like this. So just pay attention to how this is in the manual, and you're putting everything in the correct location. Now, I'm going to go over the next step. So we've already built these from earlier, so they're ready to go. Now, if you remember, we had these in the front. It's the exact same piece, which is so nice about this kit. It's all the same parts. But this time, we're going to mount the long post facing down in the rear. We're also going to put a ball stud right here. But when you get the manual, there is a little supplemental sheet, and this will be stapled to it. They give you extra. You're going to use just one 1mm washer, and it's going to go underneath the ball stud, and it's going to space the ball stud up or off this by 1mm. You're just going to put this underneath here, and this is to zero out your bump steer in the rear. So when you have this here and your suspension goes through its motion, you will have no change in tow, and it is really recommended you start off with this for the baseline. So I've pre-oiled my bearings. I let them sit. I've laid out my parts to make sure I have everything. Guys, please be careful when you open this bag. There are two little grub screws right here, and they're used to secure the pin that goes through the axle and the barrel. Now you're going to notice that there are this set of pins and this set of pins. This set is larger in diameter and length. The larger ones are going to go through the CV barrel and go through the axle. These right here are for your hexes. So they'll go through this hole here. It's what holds the hex on, and you have your little 2.5 millimeter screws that are for your clamping hexes. So just be careful when you open this bag. I like to let everything go out on this kind of rubber mat so it doesn't move around, and I'm very careful in making sure I have everything that I need. So like I said, guys, from this point on, the build is very quick. As a matter of fact, we're pretty much done with the car. Next step is to build the shocks. All right, everyone. One thing I just want to stress home, you are going to put the barrel through the drive shaft. The pin will go through the output axle through the barrel. There is only an opening on one side of the axle for the set screw. Apply a generous amount of Loctite to the set screw and thread it in here, okay? So I am going to try to do this with one hand. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is an important part of the step of the build. We need to make sure that this is properly secured. You are going to feel like you're going to want to tighten this a lot, but we need to remember this is a very small screw. What I like to do is apply force until I feel a little bit of a twisting in my tool, and then I'll just hold it there. I will not apply any more force. I'll just hold it there for a few seconds when I start to feel that twist. Then I gently release it and pull my driver out. The absolute best advice I can give you is when you are first starting to run your car, check these screws. I would do it really after the first few passes. When I did it immediately after each pass. I like to take a little bit of a break and on a new car, go over it, make sure everything's well. But it does seem like you'll put a little bit more twist on, and then eventually I don't have any more issue. But the very first few passes, check these screws. They're easy to check. You can do it on the car. You don't have to remove anything. Your driver will fit behind the hub and you can access the screw. But I'm really going to stress this. Check this screw often the first few times you run it, and then I would check it every time you're done with the car for the day as your regular maintenance. Okay, so now our axles and hub assemblies are fully assembled. The only thing I'm going to mention is this screw that holds the clamping hex on. It's the only screw I do not apply Loctite to. You do not want to over tighten this screw. You will snap it. Okay, I would tighten it down to just tight. You'll feel the clamping hex. You'll feel this clamping hex just start to squeeze and clamp itself. Do not over tighten this screw. You will break it. Okay, but this is the way it looks. This is the right hand side. This is the left hand side. The ball stud is going to face down. You'll read the Exotek up in the rear. All right, everyone. Well, the rear axle and hubs assembly are installed. Here are your toe links. This is a caster link. This is a camber link. So here's where you will adjust your toe. I'd suggest start out with the factory settings at 55 millimeters. It will give you 0 toe in the rear. If you make this longer than 55 millimeters, it will toe it in. I do not suggest making it any shorter than 55 millimeters because then you'll have some toe out in the rear. You do not want that. 55 millimeters makes this exactly 0. Okay, so this is a measurement I want you to be critical on. If you are tipping over one way, the other way, I would rather you be 55.01, 55.05, even 55.1 than 49. Okay. I think 1/4 millimeter increments to lengthen this is a good place to go if you need to add more rear grip. So 55.25, 55.5, 55.75, like that. But this is the adjustment that you're going to make. I would suggest staying with the factory for the caster and staying with the factory for the camber link adjustments. All right, now is a really good time to get this set while you can work on the car. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, everyone, it's time to assemble the shocks. I'm going to go over a few things and give you some tips. Again, I recommend you carefully lay everything out. Make sure you have everything you're supposed to have. The thing that you want to look out for are these E-clips, okay? Exotek does give you extra, but they are very small and you can lose them. So just be careful, lay them out. You need 8 in total. They do give you extra, but just be careful. So I want to go over a couple things on the E-clips. You will put it on the lower ring of the shaft first. Then you will put your piston on and put the upper E-clip on. Now, I want you to take a very good look at this. This is what it looks like when it's fully inserted. You will not see any air gap at the top. I have seen people think they get it on all the way and they can still see just a little bit of this little point. A little bit of this little point right there. You should not be able to see that. That little point needs to go inside the groove. So again, this is what it looks like when it's fully inserted, okay? Please make a note of that. I've seen a lot of people think they get it on all the way and they start running the car and eventually the piston falls off. Now, I'm going to give you a tip on putting the shock cartridge together. So what I like to do is after I build the shock shaft and put the piston on, I put the lower cup on. I will put the guide, and the guide goes this way, okay? I want you to pay attention to that. The guide goes this way with this thick part facing in towards the shock, and then there is a O-ring. What I like to do at this point is get my, I use this Protec O-ring grease, but any good quality grease. And I will grease the shaft, I'll grease the O-ring, and I make sure this slides really nice. Then I take my shock body and I insert this package into the shock body and tighten down this cap right here. And then I'll take the piston and shock shaft and slide it, make sure it slides nice and free. And that is the best way I found to assemble these cartridges. This method also works for like a Team Associated that will just have a spacer in the middle and one more O-ring and another one of these that goes into the shock body. You would just do that. But for this kit, it only uses one O-ring and one guide. So again, if you install it like this, lube it all up, slide it into the shock body, tighten down the cap, and you can just take the piston and shaft, slide it out, make sure it slides well. A couple things I'm going to go over. The shock ends, I will pre-thread these. I find it makes installing on the shock shaft much easier. Now, this is something I think some people I've met in the past have just messed up or didn't realize. These O-rings here are not to sit on top or seal the cap. These O-rings go inside. There's a groove inside. This is the upper spring perch. This is your adjustment collar. This O-ring is to provide some friction on the threads so this just doesn't turn free on its own. Guys, I know this may sound silly to some, maybe it's not to others, but we have a shop here, and I can't tell you how many vehicles I've gotten in that do not have this O-ring in here, and people have actually put it here thinking it seals, where that's not the case. The bladder will seal, and that is the only thing that should be there. There are shocks that will use an O-ring. There will be a groove in there. These do not, okay? Team Associated will have another set of these that will go on here, but they don't use a bladder. It's an emulsion style shock. That's why they have that O-ring. Anytime you have a bladder like this that goes on top, nothing else should go there. Just the bladder should seal it up. So I just want to clarify that, because I thought it was common knowledge, but like I said, I've just seen so many cars come in that don't have this, and then these perches are really loose. So there's always going to be an O-ring that goes inside these perches to add some friction on the threads, and they won't just spin. Other than that, it's pretty easy to put together. So I'm going to go ahead and finish assembly of the shocks, put it on the car, and the car is really done. I just got to put the front bumper on, the wheelie bar, and she's done. This is a very straightforward, easy build. I think anyone who's building it will enjoy this build, especially when you realize or just see for yourself just how the quality of the components are and how free everything moves with little to no play. Job well done, guys. Job well done. Okay, all my shocks are now built. It's time to fill them up with oil and bleed them. I will make a note that it's not called out in the manual, but I will set this stroke length, the exposed shock length, to 15.0 millimeters to start. That's just where I start out. I may make changes to that, but a good base is to make this exposed shock shaft, which we call the stroke length, because it's effectively the length of the full stroke of the shock, to 15.00 millimeters to start, and do it evenly on all 4 shocks. Okay, guys, I'm back. So I've just got done bleeding the shocks, and there is no air bubbles. I've let them sit for a while, but I'll check to make sure there's no air bubbles. Now, I'm going to show you my tip for bleeding the shocks, putting the bladder on in a way I find works best every time. So remember now, I said I set the stroke length to 15 millimeters. And what I'd like to do is have 3/4 of that used up in what we're going to do with the bleed. So I have this tool here. It makes it handy, but if you can find something to do it, I have 5 millimeters. So I am going to depress the shock, okay, 3/4 of the way. So now I take the bladder and I put the bladder on the top, and I will let the oil squeeze out. And I'll rotate the bladder a little bit till it seats really well. Now, this is the trick to the whole thing. I'll gently hold it on, and I will pull the shock shaft out. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but it will actually pull the bladder down. This is how we know we have a good vacuum here and there's no air. I will take the hat. I'll put the hat on top. I'll put the cap on. And while I'm holding the shock shaft down, I will tighten it up. Okay. And you want to just be careful here. And make sure it tightens down nicely. And then you're just going to check it. And when you check it, it should go all the way in, and maybe at the most just want to come back out very lightly, but you should not feel any air, and it should be smooth the whole way. That is the best way to assemble these shocks. Okay, everyone, our shocks are bled and installed on the car. At this point, we're pretty much really done with the build. This is a very easy car to build. Really, the only thing left is put the front bumper on your electronics and the wheelie bar, but there's really nothing special about that. The last tip I'm going to leave you with is these press on to these balls. It does go one way. If you look inside of this hat, you will see that one side is slightly larger than the other, and that's the side that will go into the ball. If you don't have it right, you'll know, because it'll be like very difficult, to not feel like impossible to pop on. Just turn it around. It is tight, so it does require some force, but it makes it for no play. But bear in mind that these will only go one way. Obviously, these only go one way on the bottom, but it's the same in the rear. So at this point, we're just going to add a servo and our electronics of choice, and we have a lot of room to install the battery. This is an amazing car, guys. I think if you're watching this video and you own one and you're building it, you're going to be very impressed with the performance and just how easy this thing is to work on and maintain and adjust. So I hope this video helped all of you guys out, and please feel free to ask me any questions you may have.